The title of this solo podcast is Competition Breeds Parity. In 1954, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. And prior to that, everyone had said how that was a ridiculous thing to even try, and that the body could not hold up to run a 4-minute mile, that it was impossible. But Bannister played it out in his mind, and it's something that he devoted himself to, and he broke it. But that isn't the most instructive thing. It's that within a month and a half, John Landy broke the 4-minute mile, and then within a couple of years, 10 others broke the 4-minute mile. So what does that teach us? Well, what that teaches us is that human beings only believe something is possible when someone else has done it first. And there's an interesting corollary to Shakespeare, because Shakespeare wrote plays either based upon plays that had already been written or based upon things that had happened in history. They weren't created from scratch. Human beings have a tendency to compete. They tend to look at the things that are in play and enter into a conflict in order to achieve that thing. And when they enter that thing, they are entering that thing with the idea of what has already been done, and most often even less than that, what is the most common thing being done, and then they compete at that. So that becomes their game within the game. Their game within the game becomes to get better and to improve and to inch by the next person and to get to a point where they can call themselves good, or in a particular place, a standard or a hierarchy. Never, ever, almost never do they look at something and say, this is the way it's being done, this is what's already been achieved, and I wonder what the outer possibility for a human really is. That is a very rare person who approaches the matter from that way. Even in professional sports, all across professional sports, there's an enormous amount of parity. Why is that? Well, when you ask any question, it depends who's posing the question and who it's being posed to. And if you pose a question to society, society will give you society's answers. And quite frankly, even those who are amongst the more successful people in society, even they will be conditioned to give you societal answers according to their own conditioning. And so the natural answers that you will receive if someone asks the question, why? Well, what is it about this person that allows him to get to the top, and no one else has done that? They will begin to justify the status quo. They will begin to say things that are in support of that which has already been done. So the posing of the question, what is really possible, can only be made by the person who is immune to outrage, because that kind of person will pay a price. He will get swarmed and he will be shot down by society, who insists that mediocrity is the order of the day. And so if you say, well, why, for instance, why was Tiger Woods the best? Why was he so dominant? That book hasn't been written. And the reason it hasn't been written is because it probably wouldn't sell a lot of copies. People aren't interested in the truth. They're interested in sort of the salacious details about things. They're interested in hyperbole. They're interested in media. They're interested in fantasy. They're interested, in comedy. They're interested in entertainments. No one's really interested in the truth. Uh, you simply have top of the head answers about things um, that aren't really based upon really any evidence. So you'll hear, well, Tiger Woods was the best, and that's because he was the most talented, and that's because he had a green beret as a father, and that's because his mother was a Buddhist, and that's because he was physically he was physically more gifted than other golfers, and that and on and on and on. Now, uh, the rapidity with which someone gives a response often implies or often betrays the source of that response. Um, so when someone immediately shoots out a reflexive response, you know it isn't based upon anything real. It's based upon opinion and conjecture. And that opinion and conjecture is informed by media and books and the status quo and the societal opinions and the societal beliefs. So competition breeds parity. The reason that it does so is because human beings are conditioned to look at other human beings in order to discover what's possible. And so if in hockey the average is, I don't know, let's say it's 3 goals a game, then everyone will try to no one will ask the question, how do I score 12 goals a game? That's ludicrous. And the coach who asks that question will probably get fired. In team sports, there's no freedom. You are completely beholden to a GM, and wherever there's GMs and boards and committees, you're sunk because there probably isn't a single person in that so-called team environment who is an outlier with regard to the way that he thinks, and everyone's already regressed to a conditioned mean. So you don't have a chance unless you're willing to get fired every week. That person has a chance, but then eventually he's not going to have a place to work. So when in a very interesting thing happens in competitive sports. In competitive sports, players sign a contract and they don't know that they're signing it. And the contract goes like this: if I'm better than you, then I will play down to you. If you're better than me, then I will try to play up to you. And we will both meet in the middle. And make sure that neither of us runs too far away from each other. This is the way that humans subconsciously think. For that rare person who becomes dominant like a tiger, he doesn't subscribe to those contracts, and that's largely because of his training. That's largely because of the way in which he was raised. Not from a parenting perspective, but from the visions that were created by him and for him. Those things are done by design. I think competition cements one as being a cog in the wheel. It ensures that one will only get to a certain point. It is a path to struggle, and struggle is a very romantic idea. So the whole system is rigged. So if a person says, "Well, if that's what's being done, that I have to enter that foray and try to earn my keep, and therefore I will work hard and I will struggle." And if he for a moment questions, well, why do I have to struggle? There's already a prepackaged response for that, which is, well, without struggle there is no progress. You must struggle. You must work hard. Everyone else is working hard, and so that question will be beat right out of him the very moment it's uttered. So there's already an answer for every reservation that that person may have. It's already done. There's already a brochure. There's already a sign. There's already a picket. There's already a bumper sticker. Everything's already been answered before it's even questioned. So this is why it takes a sort of a human being with a DNA which basically despises and resents the culture because it knows that everything out of the culture's mouth is complete drivel and nonsense, and all it can do is limit him. No one, no one is going to benefit from a culture. A person can only be limited by the culture. So, in business, this happens all the time. In business, there's a competition, and usually that competition centers around price. And and if you are selling shoes, and your shoes are the same types of shoes that someone else is selling, then the only choice that you have is to compete based upon price. And that, as you likely know, is a very, very rapid race to the bottom. Eventually, you will get to a point where you will be outbid and you can no longer stay in business because you must make a certain amount of profit in order to stay in business. So that's totally unsustainable. So the wise person will create something that nobody else has. Because if you create something that nobody else has, there is no there is no fixed price for whatever your thing happens to be, because you are the only one who has it. Um, and that which the market cannot define, it cannot control. So people are too quick to jump into the ring. If you jump into the ring, you are resigning yourself to a lifelong process of struggle. If you choose not to fight, then there is a possibility for you. Uh, if you choose the path of mastering something as opposed to competing for something, then that's a fundamentally different path for a fundamentally different person. Because even if a person is sympathetic and sensitive to that idea, um, he'll be walking down a corridor of a million people his entire life, and from both sides of the corridor he will be shouted at, by people who are trying to pull him away from that towards competition, telling him how unrealistic it is, and telling him how impractical it is, and telling him, does he think that he's better than so and so? Who does he think he is? And if it really could be mastered, then people would have already mastered it. And I've gotten this question many times in the world of golf, from the PGA Tour, and talking to Golf Channel analysts and other people. And the questions are always the same. I can see them coming from a mile away, and which is that, do you know anybody who has mastered this? Do you know anybody who is? And my answer is always the same, which is, do you know anybody who has asked the questions? No one asks these types of questions. Everyone is far too busy seeking answers, and answers sooner or later, always and forever, fail. At some point, an answer will fail. But if one learns to ask questions, then those questions create a path. Answers remove one from the path. So no, human beings are not taught this way. This is completely. This is like talking. This is like as if I was speaking on Mars. This is so. It's one thing to be countercultural. It is one thing to be a contrarian, but when when the ideas, and when the talk, and when the conversation approaches something that's frankly into outer space with regards to its distance from Earth, it it really only resonates with a very small number of people, because most will fall off by the time that we hit Earth's atmosphere. And the reason that it is the case is because society has gone so far astray. It isn't that outer space is so far; it's that Earthlings have moved so far from the truth. So naturally, there's going to be a million miles of distance. The degree to which people have gone astray is so astounding, that it's natural for someone to think that, how could it be that everything that I've been taught is completely wrong, and not only wrong, but criminally wrong? pathologically wrong, disastrously wrong. That's the sky is falling type of mentality. That's going to be very hard for people to accept, and that's why it's for a very small number of people. And it is actually no coincidence that the individuals who become supreme and become Miyamoto Musashis, there's only one. There's not two. Um, so that stands perfectly to reason. So competition isn't the road to greatness. Uh, Mastery is the road to greatness. But if you walk the path of mastery, you're going to have to walk it all alone. There's no one who's going to accompany you, um, because no one has been taught that. No one believes that. That's not in the water. That isn't in the food and in the air. You're basically going to have to breathe a different sort of oxygen, and it's only a person with a unique form of DNA who has the lungs to breathe that sort of oxygen. Uh, because every step of the way, you're going to have to walk blind and deaf and dumb and talk to nobody, convince nobody, and listen to nobody. The number of people who can actually tell you the truth in this world, you can count on maybe half of one hand. It's the situation is that extreme. So, competing with someone is essentially a road to mediocrity. And while you may become very good at that craft, um, the question that you will not have asked is, I wonder how, quote, good I could have been if I didn't pursue the path of competition. So the reason that parity exists is because everyone competes. And where there is competition, there has to be parity because everyone chooses to fight for the same prize. Uh, and it isn't even that they're going for the prize, it's that they choose to fight. The fight is the main attraction, the struggle is the main attraction, the hard work is the main attraction, the bleed and sweat and uh, uh, and give forth day and night effort. That's the main attraction. That seems to be the litmus test that everyone is taught to go by. Um, so I don't buy for a second that a human being can't become anything. I don't buy that for a second. Now, I will say that a person is wise to follow his talents, and wherever his talents happen to lie, then that's naturally the wisest course of action for him. Um, but this idea that you have to compete and that you have to inch your way past another. I mean, just ask Usain Bolt. Ask Usain Bolt what he does the moment that he realizes in an Olympic competition that he's about to win. He slows down. He slows down. So the question that interests Usain Bolt, for no good or bad, but the question that interests him is, can I win? Can I best the next person? And so long as you are committed to besting the next person, the moment that you best him by an inch, you'll stop. And once again, there's no right or wrong. I can only speak for myself. And what fascinates me is the outer limits of human possibility, is what is possible for a human being. And if that's the question, then Bolt wouldn't slow down. He would find out what he truly can achieve. So, so parity is a natural offspring of competition. And if people were truly elite, if a human being truly wants to take full advantage of the glory of his humanity, then why would he have any contemporaries? Why would he not be smitten by the idea that he could arrive at a tournament or in the world of business and never have any competition whatsoever, because he has discovered the truth about that thing, because he has devoted himself to the mastery of that thing? I don't know why a person who seeks to be a legend wouldn't do that. I can only say that the number of individuals in this world who think that way or who have such desires, I think they do exist, but I believe that they're beat out of them by this caustic and poisonous culture in society. So, in the end, competition has no choice but to breed parity and mediocrity. Good night.